I'd like to mention something about the shemen, the oil, and the wicks. If you use oil and wicks when you light the Hanukkah candle, you know that every day there's a residue. There are leftover oil, and there's leftover wicks. Now that oil and those wicks are designated for this mitzvah. You're supposed to use them exclusively for the mitzvah of Nerot Chanukah. So that it's a good idea, in as far as possible, to reuse the leftover oil, in other words, to use the oil that's left in the vial tomorrow, and then the day after. Just keep using it. And the same thing is true about the wicks. You're not allowed to use them for any other purpose, because, after all, they were designated muktzeh. They were designated for this particular mitzvah and no other mitzvah of its kind. In fact, the Neirot of Hanukkah, that means the oil and the wicks, have a special halacha associated with them, and that is that even after Hanukkah, they remain with this designation. Unlike, as Tosfos says in the Gemara in Shabbat, Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, Tosfos says that Neirot Hanukkah are different, for example, than Noi Sukkah, the decorations that you hang in your Sukkah, which are muktzeh for the Sukkah during Sukkot. But when Sukkot comes to an end, you can do anything you want with the Noi Sukkah, with the decorations of the Sukkah. The same is true in that machloket about the oil that's left in the cup on Shabbat. You have a candle, and the candle is supposed to burn for as long as it's supposed to burn, but it goes out earlier and there's oil left in the cup. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't use the oil on Shabbat. It's muktzeh, even though it's no longer fueling a flame, but you can't use it on Shabbat. Since you can't use it on Shabbat, we call that muktzeh. But Rabbi Yehuda would say clearly that after Shabbat, that oil becomes freed from all imposing restrictions, and you could use the oil. So we see the oil on Shabbat you can use. The Noi Sukkah you can use after Sukkot. But the Neirot of Chanukah, the ptilim, the oil and the wicks that you use to light the candles with, they cannot be used after Chanukah for any other purpose. And all you could do is collect them and burn them. And burn them up so that they no longer exist. Tosfos in that Gemara on Shabbat, Daf Mem Dalet Amud Aleph, quotes in the name of the Ri an interesting notion, and that notion is this: that when you put the oil, even though lighting the candles have a theoretical limit, because you can start at a certain time and then ad shetichle regel min hashuk. So we usually say that the candles have to burn about 40 minutes, except for Erev Shabbat, when you have to let them burn for an extra half hour or so. But this idea that there's a limit doesn't really have anything to do with the oil. When I put the oil and the wicks in the candle, as far as I'm concerned, they could just burn forever. Because the sipur, the story that I tell about the miracle of Hanukkah is really an ongoing story. It has to do with a point of view and the way that you look at things. So that even though my specific obligation is to light the candles for 8 days, I have an ongoing interest that the candles should be lit forever and ever, so to speak. And therefore, that's why you have to be careful when you have oil and you have wicks to collect the oil and the wicks, and at the end of Chanukah to burn them independently, and certainly not use them for anything else on the one hand, and on the other hand, don't throw them into the garbage, which is a less respectful way of dealing with this problem.